Hi everybody, this is IELTS Breakthrough, and this video is about the third type of comparison sentence that you can write. We're going to talk about how to use verbs to make comparisons. Keep watching this video if you're going to take the IELTS Academic writing test anytime soon. It's got some really useful strategies that you can use when you are writing and making comparisons in that Task 1 graph question. So stick around. If you're new to IELTS Breakthrough, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name's David Bourne. I am your IELTS Breakthrough coach. IELTS Breakthrough helps you get a high score in IELTS so that you can study at an international university and progress in your career. We've got lots of tutorials, so make sure that you subscribe and watch all of the free information that will help you to improve your IELTS results. In this video, as promised, we're going to be talking about verbs that mean bigger than or smaller than. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just give you a kind of overview of the strategy. We're talking about writing a sentence that means X is bigger than Y. So, for example, X outperformed Y. That's what I mean when I say bigger than. You're writing that X is bigger than Y. We also have smaller than, and you need to change the verb for that one. You would write something like this: X lagged behind Y. So there, X is smaller than Y. As you will see in a minute, it is very important to know what your variable X is and what your variable Y is, and then if you are making a kind of bigger than statement or smaller than statement. We're going to look at some important tips and tricks in this video. The first thing then is to look at the key vocabulary you can use. So here are the verbs you can use that mean bigger than. We have outpace, outnumber, outperform, outstrip, outmatch, and outdo. So as you can see, most of them have the prefix out. There are a few more to add to this list: overtake, surpass, and exceed. Now, the good news is you can just learn this set of verbs, and that will give you all of the vocabulary that you need to describe this structure. And even better news, the list of verbs that mean smaller than is even shorter. Here they are: underperform, lag behind, drop behind, fall behind. And we also have trail, which can be just trail or trail behind. That's all the vocabulary that you need to know. Now, let me just show you a couple of examples of the bigger than statements so that you can see how they work in a real comparison sentence. The amount of people in London who owned mobile devices outnumbered the amount of people in New York who owned mobile devices. The number of people who visited London noticeably outpaced the number of people who visited Edinburgh. And one more example: the percentage of people who said that they would not cycle to work outmatched those who said that they would cycle to work. And a few examples of this comparison sentence that mean X is smaller than Y. The level of pollution in Los Angeles trails behind the level of air pollution in Toronto. The second example, the number of people who visited Edinburgh lagged behind the number of people who visited London. Now, things get a bit more detailed when you are dealing with the verbs that mean bigger than. X is bigger than Y. For these kind of verbs, you can also use the passive voice. So you need to know that you can write these sentences in the passive voice and in the active voice. All of those examples I showed you were in the active voice. For the passive voice, you just need to add was, verb, and then by. Was outpaced by. Was outperformed by. X was outperformed by Y, and so on. The key to whether you need to use the passive or the active depends on your focus. Are you focusing on making a comparison with X, or are you making a comparison where you focus on the variable Y? Note that when you use the passive, you might have to reverse the variables. Here's what I mean. So in the active voice, we have X outperformed Y. If you want to write the exact same information in the passive voice, then you need to reverse the variables. So it would be Y was outperformed by X. And this is what I mean by focus. You can see that in our active voice statement, the focus is on variable X. And then when we put it into the passive voice, our focus changes to the other variable, that is variable Y. So just be very clear about what variable you want to focus on. I do have a practice exercise for you here. It's really useful to just look at some sentences and read them, understand them, and decide if they have the same or different meaning. So I've got a little practice exercise you can do. Just click on the link in the description and you can go to it. It asks you to decide if the sentence pairs are the same or different in meaning. There's no registration or payment required. It's completely free, all just to help you improve your ability with this kind of comparison structure. Again, it's in the description. Please check it out after you have watched the video. All right, let's get on to the easier tips now. I've been talking about active and passive voice. Please note that this active-passive choice only refers to when you're dealing with the bigger than verbs. If you're trying to write X is smaller than, and you're using the trail behind, fall behind, underperform, then you only use the active voice with those, and you do not need to get confused about the passive. Okay, on to some easier tips now, and the next tip is to use that of to avoid repetition. When you look at variable Y, you can see that there is a lot of repetition that you need to write. You can just eliminate this using that of. Let's look at an example from earlier and just look at it and see where the repetition is. The amount of people in London who owned mobile devices outnumbered the amount of people in New York who owned mobile devices. I'm sure you can see the repetition there. Now, the best way to write this is The amount of people in London who owned mobile devices outnumbered that of New York. It's easy and efficient, isn't it? And it will impress your examiner. So have a go and use that of. Now, the other tip to note is to tell your reader whether you have a big or a small difference. To do that, you can use the adverbs that I told you about in the video on describing trends. And of course, if you haven't learned how to describe trends, why not? Make sure that you watch my video after this. I'm talking about verbs like significantly, noticeably, dramatically, and if you have a small difference, you can use slightly. These adverbs just go in front of your verb, and you can use them either in the passive or the active voice as you like. With the passive, it's going to be was slightly outnumbered by. X was slightly outnumbered by Y, and so on. Okay, so that is the third way of making comparisons. Now, this might seem a little bit confusing or complicated at times, but if you do master using this comparison structure, it is going to impress the examiner. You impress the examiner, you increase your score. So I do recommend that you work through some examples. Now, let me just summarize the key points in the video. So we've looked at verbs that mean either X is bigger than Y or X is smaller than Y, and I've given you the key verbs that you can learn and use for this. If you are trying to write using the bigger than verbs, you can choose to write the sentence in the active voice or the passive voice. Both are possible, but they will change the focus, i.e. which variable you are paying attention to. So be very clear about the kind of comparison information that you need to communicate to the examiner. If you're writing sentences where you're saying X is smaller than Y, then you do not need to use the passive voice and just stay in the active voice. And then the other tip is to use that of and avoid repetition. And finally, identify whether we have a big or a small difference using adverbs. A reminder that this kind of thing needs practice before you go into the test. So just to encourage you to practice with these sentences. Remember, there are 3 practice levels that you can apply. Just start easy with level 1, which is to copy out some of these comparative sentences with verbs. Once you have copied them out several times and you feel you know how they work, then you can do some controlled exercises and certainly make sure that you do understand the meaning of these sentences. After controlled exercises, level 3 is to write your own comparative sentences using bigger than or smaller than verbs. And there are practice exercises in the description. As I said, just click on the link and have fun with those. No registration, no payment needed. It's all part of the service. Of course, if you have any questions, don't be shy. Let me know in the comments. How do you make comparisons for task 1 of the academic IELTS? This is an essential part of writing a good answer to task 1, so you need to know all about it, and I'm here to help you. Let me know in the comments. Well, I'll see you in the next video. Just remember, IELTS Breakthrough, IELTS Success. Have a great Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday or Sunday, whatever you are doing. I'll see you in the next video.